Saturday and Sunday, the weather slowly turns milder from the west.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry and this is Dewbs & Co, the show where we'll get into some of the things that have got you talking. And if you have kids at school or you look after them, you might need to pay attention because over 23,000 schools, and that's just in England and Wales, by the way, are about to be battered by teacher strikes over the next few months. I want to know, where do you stand on this? Do you think all's fair in the pursuit of more dosh? Or do you think these pupils that, let's face it, have had an incredibly hard time when it comes to disruption of their education, do you think they're just basically getting discarded, forgotten about? Who cares about them when we care about this? I want your thoughts on that tonight. And what on earth is going on with our police up and down the country? There have been scandals galore, plenty. All day, every day, it feels like we seem to be reading about the latest police officer that's been in trouble or sacked, and today was no different. Who is going to be responsible for reforming the police? Do you think they're up to the job, and do you trust the police, quite frankly, to be reformed? I want your thoughts on that. And the House of Lords. We talk often, don't we, about whether or not it should even be a thing. But let's just imagine for tonight it is, and it will remain so. Where should it be located? There's been suggestions that, quite specific ones, I must say, that Blackpool should be the location. Are you in Blackpool? Do you want the House of Lords there? Is that the destination of choice? And are you doing dry January? If so, well done, you're about halfway through. But it's made me ponder, do you think us Brits have a problem with alcohol? If you're on Twitter, jump on there and give me your thoughts on the poll that's running right now. But before we get into all of that, let's bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines.
Michelle, thank you. Good evening to you. The top stories on GB News tonight. More than 70,000 university staff have confirmed the date they'll walk out on strike as being the 1st of February. It's the first of an 18-day strike by the University and College Union. And it follows the RMT Union's announcement that train drivers at 14 rail operators will also walk out on the 1st and 3rd of February in a long-running dispute over jobs, pay and conditions. And drivers at the ASLEF Union will also strike on the same days, while 100,000 civil servants will also be walking out on the 1st of next month. And that follows the National Education Union announcing 7 days of teachers' strikes in February and March in a dispute over pay. Now, the Home Secretary said today that yesterday was a dark day for British policing after a former Met Police officer admitted multiple sex offences. David Carrick pleaded guilty to 49 offences, including dozens of rapes over an 18-year period. Today, he was officially sacked by the force at a misconduct hearing held in his absence. The Met Police now investigating over 1,000 cases of sexual offences and domestic abuse involving its staff. Speaking to the Commons earlier on today, Suella Braverman said the standards and culture in the police service must change.
This case will rightly throw a spotlight once again on women's safety. No one should suffer abuse or feel frightened or harassed, whether they are at home, out and about, or online. We are taking concerted action to prevent violence against women, support victims and survivors, relentlessly pursue perpetrators and strengthen the system as a whole.
Well, Londoners have been expressing their concern over the culture within the police force.
After all those allegations, one of them was only 4 months after the Sarah Everard case, when the Metropolitan Police assured us things would change, and I don't think things have changed. And I think it's extremely worrying for women to realise there may be a culture of sexism in the police force. And misogyny.
I think you should have one of the harshest penalties out there, and definitely imprisonment, and you should not just... I think the whole sector of Metropolitan should be reviewed.
Well, in other news today, the Scottish Secretary has been defending the UK government's move to block Holyrood's controversial gender bill reforms. It's the first time Westminster has made an order under the Scotland Act to prevent a law from Holyrood going to royal assent. Alistair Jack says the reasoning behind the move is that Holyrood's gender bill would undermine equality laws in the rest of the UK.
The bill would have serious adverse effects on the operation of the Equality Act 2010. And as I've set out in my correspondence with the First Minister yesterday, I would prefer not to be in this situation. The United Kingdom Government does all we can to respect the devolution settlement and to resolve disputes. It is open to the Scottish Government to bring back an amended bill for reconsideration in the Scottish Parliament. So to conclude, Mr. Speaker, I have set out to the Scottish Government that should they choose to do so, I hope we can work together to find a constructive way forward.
Set to publish draft legislation outlining how it plans to ban gay conversion therapy, including for transgender people. It's going to unveil its proposed approach to banning the conversion practices on the basis of sexuality and gender identity in England and Wales. The government previously said its plans would not cover trans people, which has caused a backlash from campaigners. The law will be limited to over 18-year-olds who do not consent or to those who are being coerced to undergo the practice. Climate activist Greta Thunberg has been detained once again during climate protests in Germany. The 20-year-old was escorted away by police officers after taking part in demonstrations against the expansion of an open-pit coal mine in the west of Germany. It follows protests over the weekend, with German police saying investigations have now been launched against 150 people following violent clashes. The protesters said Germany should be using more renewable energy instead of mining for more fossil fuels. The government said it remains committed to phasing out the use of coal by 2030. Here, hundreds of people have lost their jobs after the car battery company Britishvolt fell into administration. Administrators confirmed it failed to secure the necessary funding to keep the company going. The company had planned to build a huge new factory in Northumberland, which had been praised by the former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. That's it. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. I'm back in an hour. Now back to Michelle for Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for that, Polly. Well, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock this evening. And alongside me, I've got the political consultant, Emma Burnell, and the former MEP and now life peer in the House of Lords, Baroness Jacqueline Foster. Good evening, both of you. Welcome. And Happy New Year to you. Don't think I've seen you this year. You know the drill as well, don't you? It's not just about us three here in the studio. It's very much about you guys at home as well. What's on your mind tonight? You can email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email address, or you can tweet me at gbnews. And if you're sitting at home thinking, I've got to go out, I've got to go to the chippy for my tea, don't you worry about that, because you can take us with you. Don't forget, we are on the radio as well. So wherever you are tonight, you are very, very welcome. I didn't get a chance to do you guys insights on my fashion yesterday because of the pesky breaking news, but you've not let me down tonight. If I had £1 for every single one of you that's told me I look like Colonel Sanders from KFC tonight, I'd be absolutely minted. John says, have you just come away from auditioning for the new parlourmaid in the upstairs downstairs programme? No, I have not. And my favourite one tonight, I've got to say, I'm going to make a compilation of all of these. At the end of the year, I'll do some kind of podcast or something of you guys and your hilarious fashion commentary. Phil, I think you've won it tonight because apparently you say that I look like one of those things that your grandma used to put over her bog roll. I think I know what you mean. I'm not sure it's very flattering. Anyway, let's move on to our top story, shall we? Apparently, some of you are saying I look like a head teacher as well tonight. I wish I was, quite frankly, because I might be going on strike. I could get a couple of days off, couldn't I? Because we're hearing again today that strike action will continue. I'm focusing tonight on teachers. They're going to be going on strike for about 7 days over the next 2 months. The first walkout will take place on the 1st of February. I have to say, though, not all the teaching unions have backed the strikes. Do you remember last week we had a teacher on here, didn't we? And his union actually adverted they didn't get the turnout. I think they got 42% instead of the 50 that they needed. Anyway, Education Secretary, she's saying, Jacqueline, that the teachers are turning their backs on pupils. Is she right?
Yeah, she's absolutely spot on. And I just think this situation is totally avoidable. I think it's totally unnecessary. In my former life, a long time ago, I was a trade union negotiator for about 13 years.
Oh, was you?
I was, yes.
In which industry?
In the airline industry.
Right.
So I spent 3 years as some of the older viewers will know, as a shop steward in the Transport and General Workers Union, I was one of the first female shop stewards at the time.
Good for you.
And then a number of years later, we formed a new union, and so I was one of the founder members there, and I was one of the senior negotiators there for about 10 years. So I'm not somebody that's sitting here that doesn't believe that anyone can go on strike. That's not where I'm coming from. Where I'm coming from is the fact that I think what's not being taken into account, not just in the education sector, but in others, with the situation at the moment, is the purgatory, basically, that this country went through over the couple of years of COVID. And if we bring that then to the education system, we had children who were, frankly, in my view, let down at times. I think there were times that they didn't need to be taken out of school. Other countries prove that. I hope that isn't the case ever in the future. And we saw that there were issues then with safeguarding. We saw cases arising after all of those situations where the children weren't in school, where children who were vulnerable were not being monitored, and we saw some horrendous results of that.
Arthur Labinger Hughes pops to my mind.
Absolutely. And so with regards to now, I mean, frankly, if I'm being absolutely honest, all of the public sector that have now obviously joined in and decided that they think that they should go on, I wouldn't have given anybody in the public sector an increase at this time. I think I would have liked to have said to the public sector, you know, the public supported the entire public sector throughout all of COVID. Nobody lost their jobs. Everyone kept their contracts of employment, which was right, because we wanted to make sure we had a foundation to build on post-COVID. But the private sector, you know, these small businesses, people took an absolute hammering. As we said, children were badly affected. You know, it was absolutely awful. So to now, you know, one union after another, one area after another, particularly in the public sector, and of course the rail strikes too. I just think that that's been so inappropriate at this time. I'm not saying at some stage in the future that you know all of these areas should have a pay increase. I'm not saying that at all. I just think that the timing is dreadful, and I certainly wouldn't support them striking at all.
Oh, harsh words. Wouldn't support these strikes at all. Do you, Emma?
Yes, of course I do. It is absolutely their right to strike. Public sector pay is significantly lower than private sector pay.
No, it's
and yes, they are. The public sector raises are on average 2 to 3%. Private sector raises on average of 7%. So we are seeing a significant widening of the gap between private sector pay and public sector pay. We have a recruitment problem in schools. We are not seeing enough new teachers being recruited, and that has two impacts. First of all, it means that when teachers are having more work to do, they're working longer hours and covering more work. It also means that we are not seeing the kind of, the reason that people are not joining the teaching profession is because they're not being paid to do so. We're not attracting people into the teaching profession, and people are suffering long term. It's not the children who are going to lose a day of schooling, but the children whose education is being massively impacted by the fact that we do not value teachers properly in this country.
You say that we're not enticing people into the sector enough, but I mean, I've got some figures here published by the IFS, which show the entrance to the teacher training schemes relative to their targets. So, for example, you're saying that we're not. If you look at 100% of your target, there's not many of the subjects that are falling way below that. Some of them are over the target. Actually.
Some of them are over the target. A lot of them are below that, and I can see that from the figures you've got. We've got ones at 70%. That's 3 out of 10 not being filled. That's not OK. It's not OK to fall that far behind in a country, as a G7 country, where we should be absolutely fundamentally saying that educating our youth is our top priority. It's not OK to devalue it that much.
Do you think it's based on money that you can't get these people in?
I think it's part of it. I think money and conditions. And these strikes are not just about wages, they are also about conditions.
Well, before I come back to Jackie, you talk about conditions. I'll tell you about conditions, because you reference, for example, the public sector pay in reference to private sector. Many people, using your terms of conditions, you'd say, well, hang on a second, because if you look at a lot of these public sector workers, first and foremost, in more cases they're not, they've got a job for life, they have job security that you often wouldn't get in the private sector. You have pensions that would make your eyes water. There'd be the stuff of dreams for many private sector workers. So there's lots of different things, actually, when it comes beyond pay that would entice someone into the public sector. But Jackie, let me stick with pay for a second.
Yeah.
If you do look at the pay, to be fair to these teachers, they have had, in real terms, a pay cut over the last decade. So what the unions would say and all the rest of it is they just want fairness. They want their workers to be able to afford a decent standard of living in these tough times.
Well, I don't think they have all had pay cuts at all. I mean, of course we can measure things by inflation, and we've got high inflation at the moment. Nobody denies that. I'm surprised we've got an economy, frankly, after 2 years of what we've been through with COVID. And I think it's quite wrong to say, you may say that some of the pay increases that have gone on maybe in the last few months for the private sector have been a bit higher. But what you don't mention is the number of businesses and the number of people who lost their jobs during COVID who still haven't got a job.
Furlough was available in the private sector too.
In terms, if we're talking about, I know many teachers, I know, many people in the public sector. When I joined British Airways, it was in the public sector, and then it was privatised a number of years later. So all I'm saying is nobody wants, low wages for people. Of course, people need to be recompensed properly, but we also have to be able to cut our cloth. We have to be able to pay what we can afford. And it's not that just the government that turns around and says, you will get 3% or 1% or whatever. We have pay review bodies for a very good reason.
Yeah.
And they are independent and they make recommendations. I don't recall, actually, when the pay review body in recent years has made a recommendation to government for either health or the nurses or whoever, and it's not actually being carried through.
Well, it happened within the health sector less than 2 years ago, so it does happen, and it happens frequently. And the government do overrule them and can overrule them.
Hang on, don't talk over each other.
If I may just say, and in addition to the teachers, when I started school, teachers didn't have teaching assistants. It's good to see these days. You see all classes now, and teachers have teaching assistants. That was never, ever the case. Certainly, until a number of years ago. And I think that's good, because that frees the teacher themselves up to be focusing on other things to do as well. And so, I think teachers are valued. I think nurses are. I think people are valued by the public. But I think a lot of the public would say, fair's fair. We have to now, we've got to get this economy back on its feet. Unless we have got a successful thrusting private sector, unless we're bringing in investment, unless we're looking at entrepreneurs and people to say, come, start your company, start a business, unless we have a productive private sector, we don't generate the money
and
to
the
pay
way
for a public
to
sector.
get a successful private sector economy is to have a really well-educated workforce.
Aware of it.
And in order to do that, we need to have a well-educated, well-remunerated and satisfied workforce enabled to teach and inspire those kids.
How much pay rise do you think they should get then?
I don't want to put a number on it because I'm not in the negotiating table.
This annoys me, because you're very happy to sit there and say, pay is not enough, we're letting everyone down, so you make really bold
Well, I mean, I'd give them all 100 grand a year if I could, but I'm not the Secretary of State for Education, thank God.
No, but you must have a view. You've got a view on all the rest of it.
I think that teachers should earn above the average wage. I think that you should be able to see teaching as a profession that you can live comfortably on for life. I think that teachers, who are also parents too, by the way, let's not have this separation of, there's teachers over here and parents over here. Most teachers have kids. So we are talking about people who are in charge of our future. There is nothing to me more valuable than that. I would have teachers teaching tiny classes, well remunerated, and I think that is an investment in our future.
Just to be clear, by the way, when you start getting to the higher grades of teaching, which most of the teachers are on, they do earn above average wages.
They earn above average, but not massively above average. Not the kind of wages that you would get if you were teaching in say, a private school. You would get a massive salary. Why aren't we investing in that kind of a future for our kids?
But what you're also not wishing to emphasise is the public sector have very good packages. It's not just about your level of pay. It wasn't just about the level of pay when I was in British Airways. It was also about the pension schemes that were available. It was also about being covered fully if you were on maternity leave, if you were off sick. I mean, there are a whole raft of things when you're in full-time employment or you're on contracts in the public sector that isn't just about the level of pay, notwithstanding the employer is paying in, i.e. the government, the taxpayer, double the amount to go into those pensions, which is fine.
You couldn't be more right. It's great that they have good conditions. So should the private sector. Go on strike, guys.
You're focusing just on the take-home rate without the package.
I'm focusing on their day-to-day living. We need to have teachers who can live comfortably day to day. The teachers
I know can live on their salaries. The teachers I know live very well on their salaries. They are on holiday as often as anybody else I know.
Well, you know some very well-remunerated teachers. I don't.
Well, they're working in the public sector.
Well, I'm glad that there are occasions where that happens. It doesn't happen often enough. It should be the rule, not the exception.
But you're paid on grades, on how long you've been there. Like any company or any business, you will generally, the longer you've been there.
Yeah, but you also reach a top level of those grades, and you can't get further on. And so
you can move on. Look at the pay grade
only
structure.
If you go into the management structure. And actually, I don't want every teacher becoming a head teacher. I want really great teachers staying in the classroom.
Before you get to head teachers.
Speaking of head teachers, I'll just finish on this thing because I have to say it did make me laugh, quite frankly. The National Association of Head Teachers, they balloted their members to see whether or not they wanted to go on strike action. They didn't get their turnout. They had to get 50% of the turnout. They only managed to achieve 42%. And this is why it made me laugh. Because that union, the NAHT's General Secretary, said the following. It is incredibly frustrating that he says the anti-trade union basically legislation has compelled us to conduct the ballot by post, get this, during a period in which the management of the Royal Mail refused to take action to ameliorate the disruption to the postal service. So he is not being able to get his members on strike. The reason because they didn't get the turnout, he's blaming the fact they didn't get the turnout on the post strikes. You couldn't make it up. So this union doesn't like the disruption caused by strike action. Weird that. Anyway, what's your thoughts? Have you got kids at school? Are you a teacher? If you're a teacher, by the way, congrats to you. I wouldn't be a teacher for all the love nor money in the world. Anne, you say, I like this idea, by the way, Anne. How about it's time to fine the teachers for not allowing our kids to go to school because they're very quick to find parents for taking pupils out of school, aren't they, when it comes to things like holidays? I think you're very interesting on that one, Derek. The teachers are no different than all the other groups that simply want more money. The unions know only one way to negotiate, and that is to hold the country to ransom. One of the unions, by the way, who didn't get the turnout as well, they were saying they wouldn't have any conversations unless they got a minimum of 12%. So many people now asking for above inflation rises. Adrian, no one should get a pay rise apart from the nurses and the paramedics. They are the most important and it should be settled, but it's everyone's right to strike. I don't agree with you, by the way, Adrian. I don't think that if you're in emergency services, I don't think you should be able to strike. I know that's controversial and will upset some of you, but that is my view. Julie says, what about giving teachers more money in their pockets, but cut their pensions to fund it? That sentiment is one that's come through quite a lot. And Robert says, it is immoral to go on strike over inflation, which will go down in time. We had 2 years of education disrupted by COVID. Yes, but Robert, if you can't afford to live, turning around to, I don't know, your greengrocer and saying, I want this food, but I'll pay you in 2 years' time when things have got a bit cheaper, it won't wash with him, would it? Anyway, keep your thoughts coming in. gbviews@gbnews.uk is my email address. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'll have some more of your thoughts, but I also want to talk to you about the police. Do you still trust them? We seem to have forces galore in special measures at the moment as well, don't we? And yep, you can see that guy on the screen right now, yet another one that's been sacked. What's going on with the police? Do you trust them to reform themselves? Tell me and I'll see you in 2 minutes.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry. We are keeping you company until 7 o'clock tonight, and alongside me I've got the political consultant, Emma Burnell, and the former MEP and now live peer in the House of Lords, Baroness Jacqueline Foster. I do love the Baroness thing. I would quite like to be a Baroness.
Oh, Baroness Burnell of Baker's Arms. Don't you think that's got a ring to it? That's where I live.
Of Baker's Arms?
That's where I live.
Oh, it sounds like a local pub.
I think it's named after what was once the local pub and is now a betting shop.
Oh, well, we'll be talking about the Lords in just a few minutes, a bit later on in the programme. I'm asking you specifically, where do you think the House of Lords should be located? Blackpool is one of the suggestions that they should move to. I'll be interested to hear Jacqueline's thoughts on that. But before we get into that, let's talk the police, shall we? Because forces up and down the country, let's face it, are getting an absolute battering at the moment. And there always seems to be, doesn't there, poll after poll that says people have lost trust in them. You've got 6 forces right now in special measures. And this whole kind of concept of policing by consent, some people say that that very concept is hanging by a thread now, not least because of the stories like the one that you've heard today about a serial rapist, keeping his role in the Met Police for almost 20 years, despite repeated complaints about his behaviour. So let's be clear, we all would probably concede that the police need to reform. Do you think they've got it in them, though?
I think it's really hard to see how reform can be led from the inside after such repeated failures over such a long period of time. There is quite clearly a culture of defensiveness within the police force, a protect our own, a don't look, don't see attitude towards poor behaviour, and that can't really usually be solved from the inside. I think the Met should probably be broken up into smaller parts. I would take the very important counter-terrorism unit and separate it, and then have much more community policing based on maybe a borough or tri-borough areas. But beyond the structural reform, I think there needs to be a real look at how we attract the right people into policing.
What
because
do you
it's
call the
clear
right
that we're
person?
not. People who are not interested in... who aren't going into police in order to be a powerful person. I think they're going into police in order to be a community person is the right approach. And I think at the moment we've got I think it's 800 people who are currently under investigation out of a force of 45,000. That's quite a big percentage.
What?
And
800?
800 people out of 45,000. That's more than nearly 2% of that workforce, which is quite, who are having investigations reopened.
Because many people will be watching this going, well, if we use Emma's percentage of 2%, that means that 98% of these guys and girls, obviously, they're decent.
No, that 98% are not currently under investigation. That's quite different from they're the good guys. I think there is a problem with both those individuals, the 800 or so, clearly we need to think about, but also how are we attracting people who will want to have the kind of policing that is open and transparent and honest, and not the kind of policing that is self-protecting, self-reinforcing, becomes tribal and almost like it's a gang of its own, rather than the kind that is working in the community to break up that kind of attitude.
Can I ask, by the way, if you're at home and you are a serving police officer or a retired one, whatever, and you hear these conversations about the police, I am interested as to how you feel right now. I mean, how's your morale if you're currently serving? Get in touch, let me know. But Jacqueline, what do you make of it all?
Well, I get tired of phrases that we hear all the time about lessons learned. We have these terrible things that happen, not just in the police, we have it in all sorts of areas, and they go, we've learned all that, and they never seem to learn the lesson. This particular case... it is, of course, it's pretty rare. We know that. We know that the vast majority of police officers are trustworthy, they work hard, they're very proud to do the job that they do. My own view, and I'm no expert in this sort of policing arena, but we listen to how things move and change over the years. I think there's an issue with recruitment. I think this incessant demand that people have degrees these days to do anything runs counter to some of the... I think the public sector type jobs that we need to fill. So that rank and file, I don't blame the rank and file, those on the beat, basically. I think there's a problem with leadership within the police. I think there's a problem, as I said, with recruitment. I think there's a problem with line management in terms of how you, in any business or whatever you're doing, you have to, people who are working in your team have to be line managed properly. I don't work. I come from an industry that had a no-blame culture, so I don't see the point in blaming people for mistakes they made. What you don't want is cover-ups.
Yeah.
What you want is an openness and you want a frankness where if people, are concerned that they've said the wrong thing, that they are able to be dealt with fairly and obviously maybe put into extra training or stuff like that. So clearly, if we get on to how they police themselves, we have the IPCC, don't we, this independent body. And of course, you've got one force, I understand, looking into another. And I think they're going to have to rethink how they do that, perhaps. I mean, I think it's very difficult for civilians to come from outside who are nothing to do with the police. And we get a group of people and they go, right, you need to judge what these two police officers did. Well, we don't know the ins and outs of the job. We know what we can see. We're not stupid. So, of course, I would imagine that you'd have to have very trained people who were trained police officers that were looking into these things, which is quite right. But then it looks at how is the accountability. I mean, this particular case, how somebody ends up as a police officer either before with a criminal record, unless it was they tripped over and found an apple that fell out of a shop. You're not going to blame some kid of 10 and ruin their life. But we know we have people in the police force now. Well, I think the problem is the police service is when they changed it from a police force, which was supposed to enforce the law, to a police service, and I'm not quite sure I don't think it knows what its job is half the time, frankly. So you don't want to rule out anybody wanting to join the police, but by the same token, you want people with a good record, you want people joining for the right reasons, and they also need to understand what their obligations are. We know that the vast majority, they look after us. We rely on them. The first thing that happens, you'll know if you see an act or whatever, we go, 999. So they haven't lost all faith with the public, but I think people are getting cheesed off. Women, as we've said, particularly this sort of misogyny that's going on with a lot of these men, they're in the wrong job. Yeah. They're in the wrong job. If you cannot treat your colleague or the people that you have to serve in a proper, grown-up, respectful fashion, you are in the wrong job, as tough as it is.
I agree with most of what you say, Jacqueline. My only thing that I would pick you up on is that in terms of oversight, I think there does have to be a civilian role in that, because ultimately we do have to remember the police are there to enforce the laws on us
crime commissioners
and serve us. And I think there needs to be that pact, and both sides need to be a part of that transparency and oversight relationship.
Simon's been in touch and he says, why are male officers all tarred with the same brush? He says, it seems going on this rate, the only way forward will be to employ female officers. He says he served with the Met Police for 20 years and had exemplary service. I understand what you're saying there. Liam says, I work for Bedfordshire and Norfolk Police as a policeman, and I hate it when problems at the Met tarnish every other police force. I hear you there, but I also do have to point out that there's a number of police in special measures right now. It's not just the Metropolitan Police. This is not just a London issue by any stretch of the imagination. I want your thoughts. Do you still trust the police, by the way? If I was in a situation, I have to be honest, where, I don't know, a police car tried to pull me over, say on the side of a road, being completely honest, I wouldn't get out of my car. I wouldn't, for love nor money. And if you are a decent police officer, that must really frustrate you, because I suspect I'm not alone in that opinion. But keep your views coming in. John says the discipline in the police is non-existent and the police are investigating themselves. I firmly believe when incidents like this happen, the chief constable should be sacked. Do you? Where do you think accountability should be? Where should the buck stop? Give me your thoughts on that. I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, I'll have some more of your views, but I'm also asking you, the House of Lords, let's just all agree for a second that we should have it. Where should it be located? There's been a suggestion that it should be moved to Blackpool. Should it? I've had a lot of fun in Blackpool, but is it the right place for the Lords? You tell me.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, has Sunak proven he has a backbone by blocking the SNP's gender bill? And will Sturgeon use this to further her independence drive? Britain's top commentators, including women's rights activist Sharon Davies, weighs in. Plus, have Harry and Meghan proven they don't want to make peace with their enemies after rejecting Jeremy Clarkson's apology? And should we fear the World Economic Forum? All that, plus Kelvin McKenzie, Lawrence Fox and Megyn Kelly on Dan Wootton tonight, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewbs, keeping you company until 7 o'clock tonight alongside with the political consultant Emma Burnell and the former MEP and now life peer in the House of Lords, Baroness Jacqueline Foster. Welcome back, everybody. We've just been talking about police reform. Paul, you make a very good point. You say, I fear that once the police have all been reformed, there'll be even more work and wishy-washy than there are now. And Linda, you make a really interesting point as well. You say Britain is lawless. And it's not just women that are not safe. Look at Rotherham and Rochdale. Our children are also not safe. But to counter that as well, Bernard, he's literally just emailed in saying, how come all the discussions on all the news programmes, Michelle, only ever focus about women's safety? It's almost as if you think that men don't get attacked either. I don't think that at all. And I do kind of hear your point there. I wouldn't want to be a police officer for all the money in the world. I can tell you, as much as many serving officers get a bad rep through conversations like we've just been having, I've got to say, anyone that puts themselves in the way of harm to protect other people, I do certainly respect you. I couldn't do your job, if I'm honest. So thank you, actually, to all people that are decent, that do work hard to keep us safe. But let's move on for now, shall we? Because I am indeed luckily enough to be joined by a lord. Do we call you a lord?
No, Baroness.
Baroness. It says lord there.
Yeah.
Someone less
thought there was a man on.
Someone less intelligent than me obviously wrote that. What can I say? Anyway, we are joined by a baroness, and I thought it'd be remiss of me actually then not to have this conversation because a Tory MP from Blackpool, I wonder why he's passionate about Blackpool then, says that his town would be the perfect spot to relocate the House of Lords. The Winter Gardens apparently would be the place where you can all kind of move to, Jacqueline, and it would all be excellent, apparently, according to him. Thoughts?
Well, I know Paul very well. Good colleague of mine, yes. And as an MEP, I obviously represented the whole of the North West, and obviously I was born and brought up in Liverpool before moving south. And, you know, I don't know any chamber in the world anywhere where you've got two chambers. You've normally got a primary and a secondary chamber, where you then sort of move the secondary chamber about 200 miles away from the primary.
So why don't you move them both then? If your concern is proximity to the Commons, move the Commons as well?
It's not just that. The practicality is you'll put your government and you'll put all of the departments that surround the legislative processes, i.e. where the government and where the members of Parliament are going to be based. Like, see if you look at Holyrood up in Scotland or the way they work it in Wales. And so it's not just about where we physically go. It's about the whole backup. It's about the whole structure. It's about those people at work within that, the parliamentary estate, for example. At the moment, we are all together. We're all in the Palace of Westminster. So what you have, both chambers are there, the people that support us. If you need to be...
We're dealing working from home, Jacqueline.
No, but you're working from... You've got the primary legislation at this moment in time going into the Commons. A lot of these debates will be debated in the Lords in the next day or two. You've got all of the people that are organising all of that. They're working together to do all of that. So there's also the costs. I mean, it's costly enough to have any parliament anywhere. But if you then start... You've got the security issues too. Some people might think that that's particularly important, but it's not about who particularly is attacked. It's about an attack on the state. So there's a whole raft of things why you wouldn't practically just start separating it and put in one part of it in another part of the country.
Does snobbery play a part, do you think? Because lots of people, they quite like the whole concept of the big, grand palaces and the estate and the gardens and this and the Thames and...
No, I mean, we're fortunate, let's be honest. I mean, you know, if somebody said to me, where do you work? And I go, I work there. I mean, how many people can say that? It's very few. And it's a great privilege. I mean, it's an absolute honour. And you walk into this history. I mean, it is just, it's absolutely phenomenal. It really is. And I think we're very... I just think we're very privileged, actually, to be able to work in such a fantastic place. I don't think it's anything to do with snobbery, because somebody mooted that perhaps we should move the Lords to York. So it's not about that. I think this is just a bit gesture politics in a way. And they go, oh, I think it should go here and whatever. And I don't think it's a serious proposal, wherever it might be. You keep it all together and that's how you work it.
Well, Jacqueline, that's our pitch for it staying where it is. Has she convinced you? Give me your thoughts, Emma.
I love Blackpool. I spent quite a lot of my 20s having great nights out in Blackpool. I've got family who live just outside. For me, there are some practicalities if you're going to have a bicameral system of having those two houses close together and serviced by the same staff. But I can see the incentives to move or to put something big in a place like Blackpool that could really do with that inward investment. For me, I think there's a much bigger conversation to be had about how we devolve a lot more power and have a lot more government that happens outside of one SW1 postcode. So, and when that happens, it might be great if we move a lot of power into the northwest, that it doesn't simply go to Liverpool or Manchester, which are the obvious choices, but actually goes to somewhere that could really do with having a whole load more investment in, and actually put it in somewhere like Blackpool, which would be great. But I think that has to be the choice of the Northwest to decide how they would want to manage that. No point me sitting here, not very far from SW1, telling them how to do it.
Well, people voted against that. When you look at the whole kind of regional assemblies or whatever the referendum was.
But they
said no.
They did say no in 2004. It may be that but there are lots of different ways of reorganising our democracy. There are lots of different ways of getting as much out of SW1 as possible. And I think it's worth saying that was nearly 20 years ago now, and people have changed their minds on quite a lot of things since then.
But I don't think there's a need for another level. I mean, we have county council levels, we have metropolitan levels, we have district, we have, you know, there are plenty levels of government throughout the country.
Well, I mean, you could, for example, move the Lancashire County Council from Lancaster or Preston, I can't remember which one it's in, I've been to both to see different councils, to Blackpool. I would absolutely I'm a massive fan of councils, actually. I used to work for a local government think tank for 3 years. I would increase their powers and what they can do at that level, rather than simply adding another layer. But there are plenty of ways to do this imaginatively that could bring investment into Blackpool through pumping up democracy.
Andrew lives in Blackpool. You say that you'd absolutely welcome the investment into Blackpool's economy. I'm not surprised, actually. You guys get a fortune. It's about 320. Is it about 323 you get a day?
You get a daily. What peers get is not salaried. There's no pension. There's no pay package at all. If you attend, and only if you attend, you sign in basically, and you are paid a daily rate, which then covers. It has to cover accommodation, because obviously not everybody lives in Westminster or lives in London.
So if you travel to the Lords and you're a peer and you clock in just to go and have lunch in a subsidised restaurant, if it is indeed subsidised, and you clock out again, do you still get your 323 quid?
No, you have to have been in the chamber.
So if I go and have my lunch and I sit down in the chamber...
You can't even go into a committee and be registered. You have to have been in the chamber... or the Grand Committee, which is where the slightly smaller chamber.
So I could have my lunch, put my bottom on a chair in the chamber for a couple of minutes, check my social media and then leave, and that qualifies me for my 323.
Well, I think the whips might have something to say with that.
It's not a bad job, is it? Not a bad bit of work if you can get it. Let me know your thoughts. Blackpool, convinced that that is a location for the Lords or not, I have to say. I've had a fair few weekends in Blackpool growing up as a teenager. Unfortunate for me, though, I can't really remember much of it because, quite frankly, I drank too much alcohol, which leads me nicely on to the next topic, because we are indeed about halfway through dry January, and it makes me wonder, all this dry January, Stocktober this and quit drinking that, do us Brits have a problem with alcohol? Give me your thoughts and I'll see you in 2.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, the political consultant, Emma Burnell, and the former MEP and now life peer in the House of Lords, Baroness Jacqueline Foster. You're all getting in touch, telling me where you think the Lords should be relocated to. Some of them are not very polite, so I won't be reading them out.
The Falklands or something.
They're ruder than that, Jacqueline.
Warmer than that, I suspect.
Some of them make your eyes water. I won't read them out, it's tea time. Anyway, right, we're past the halfway point in January, of course. Are you one of those people that loudly and proudly declared that you're going to do dry January? I'm definitely not, but are you one of them? It all got me kind of thinking, Emma, because you have all these kind of 1 year no beer and Stocktober and dry January and all these kind of initiatives everywhere to try and stop us drinking. Do you think we have a problem with alcohol in this country?
So I'm going to be really open and honest here. I haven't had a drink for a year and a half, and that was because I had an awful lot of drink a year and a half ago, and leading up to that point, I definitely had a problem. I intend to try and reintroduce alcohol slowly into my life this year. I said I'd go 2 Christmases and 2 birthdays without, but I got to a point where I had to stop. And what I've noticed over the last year and a half is how socially awkward it is not to have a drink. Not in my terms, I mean, I'm quite sociable, I can talk to both of you, we've never met before and we've been chatting away in the breaks. More that everywhere you go, a glass of wine is handed to you almost automatically. There are so many things that you just don't think about it, that I'm given alcohol at, and I just think, why am I having a glass of wine at the theatre when wine makes me sleepy and sitting in a dark room makes me sleepy and what I want to do is concentrate on the stage? I think we don't think nearly enough about all of the ways in which alcohol just completely permeates our culture. Now, I'm not a ban it all person. I'm not a person who would want to deny anybody else a good time, and I hope that they can have a good time without getting to the state I got myself in. But I do think we need to maybe just all take personal conception of why do I need a drink at this point, and do I need it or do I want it? And those are two different things. I think we need to make it easier to not drink without making it harder to do anything you want to in terms of your own body.
I think it's never been easier to not drink, actually.
I think it is easier than it used to be, definitely, but it's still everywhere. And I promise you, I know this because I'm not taking the glasses that are shoved towards me.
Yeah, I've got to say, I've spoken about this before anyway. I did unfortunately wind up in AA, actually, Jacqueline, a few years ago, and I have an interesting relationship with alcohol. It's something that I have to take great care to consider and be mindful about, because alcohol is not great for a lot of people, I don't think, and I do regard alcohol as a bit of a liquid depressant. It's a social lubricant, but too much of it is indeed, in my mind anyway, a liquid depressant. And I do think it's a shame, actually, when I see just how much of everything with social engagement, interaction, is underpinned by booze. It's great if you can just have one drink and off you pop, but a lot of people can't.
Well, I quite agree, and the funny thing is, all the years I was in the airline industry, from when I was quite young, I never drank. And I never drank because, for any particular reason, I didn't particularly like it that much. Or if I did, I'd have a sip. I was working in an industry which is safety critical. So obviously there were strict rules about when you could drink, if you were away, and all of this sort of stuff. And I just found that I didn't have great alcohol tolerance. I think when I was a teenager, I'd tried a few drinks, and you get people and they sort of have about 10 drinks. I'd have about one. I didn't really feel that great. And it's only been for me probably about the last 20 years. I actually used to smoke. And, if somebody had said to me they're going to ban cigarettes or alcohol, at the time I would have said, well, you've got to ban alcohol, because I was a smoker. Well, I chose to stop a number of years ago, and I don't regret that. I'm not censorious at all about people who smoked or drank or whatever. I think we have to take our own personal responsibility. But it was hard, Emma, when people used to say to me, you're having a drink, this is years ago, and I'd say, no, I'll just have an apple juice or something. Oh, no, have a gin and tonic. Well, I don't want a gin and tonic. And you do have to actually stand there and sort of say, no, well, you're not going to enjoy yourself unless you have a drink. Well, I'm having a great time, actually, and I didn't need one. So now I enjoy a gin and tonic. And I think what we just need to do sometimes in this country, because we do have a slightly different culture, because I've lived in other countries, is enjoy the drink that you have. When you sit down, everything's in moderation, even people that still smoke, maybe. Enjoy what you do, enjoy your food, enjoy that drink that you have with it. And of course, we all went out on a Saturday night and people had a few. And I've seen people who've turned into Jekyll and Hydes.
Well, unfortunately,
which is not great. So I just think it's not an easy subject, and it's
not an easy subject.
It's not an easy subject.
The key thing is, you say about enjoy yourself and all the rest of it. Unfortunately, for many people, alcohol has gone beyond the point of enjoyment, and it's gone to the point of need. And that is when really you need to have a word with yourself, and it's not an easy thing to do. I asked you on Twitter, by the way, do you think us Brits have a drinking problem? 56.6% of you said no. The other 43.4% of you lied and said yes. No, in fact, actually, I got that the other way around. The other way around. Anyway, I think a lot of people do indeed have a problem. If you do, there's so much help available to you, and it takes bravery and guts to ask for help. Anyway, that is all I've got time for. Thank you very much, ladies, for your contribution tonight. Thank you at home too. Nigel Farage, up next. What have you got for us?
Michelle, thank you very much indeed. Well, Rishi, it's the first bold thing he's done as Prime Minister. He's going to veto Nicola Sturgeon's equalities legislation. We'll debate, was Rishi right to do this? All of that in a moment. First, let's get the weather.
Hello. The weather stays cold during the next 24 hours. Frost, ice, and in some places, further snow. Blizzards and drifting snow in Scotland. Meanwhile, across the north of Scotland, we've got this area of low pressure. That's bringing some heavy rain, sleet and snow to the Northern Isles. It's going to push a stronger wind into the north of the mainland, along with inland blizzard conditions and drifting snow. So above 100 metres for northern Scotland predominantly. We'll see the worst of the conditions with a further 15 centimetres of snow building up and gale force winds leading to blizzards and drifting during Tuesday evening. That does tend to ease later in the night. Further wintry showers into the west, a mixture of rain, sleet and snow. And a cold night to come with temperatures a few degrees below freezing in many spots and a risk of icy patches, especially towards the west and the south. So watch out for those first thing. There'll be further showers of rain and sleet across southwest England, Wales and Northern Ireland during Wednesday. There'll also be showers coming into the North Sea along with a strengthening breeze. Again, rain and sleet around the coast, snow inland and over hills. But